Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. How does the American government view President Obama's visit to India? 3 days after the American president left, my guest today is the new American ambassador, Richard Rahul Verma. This is Ambassador Verma's first interview after taking charge as American ambassador earlier this month. Ambassador, let me start with a simple question. How would you describe the president's visit? Would you go so far as to say it was a great success?
I think it was a great success. And first, let me say it's great to be on your show and to do the first interview with you. It's been quite a busy month. Secretary Kerry was here 3 weeks ago, and now the president just finishing really what we would say a transformative visit. It was a complicated 3 days. It was symbolically very important, but also substantively very important. And I think truly we have entered a new moment in the U.S.-India partnership. The president talked about a convergence of values. I think that was on display over the course of the 3 days. But we also made great progress in a number of key areas. So yes, I think it was a big success. And what the president told me when he left here said, now the hard work begins. And so we're ready to begin that hard work. And I would also just say, you know, the president talked a lot about how we're natural partners, but he said more than natural partners, America is prepared to be India's best partner, and that's what I'm committed to working on over the course of the year.
Let's go through some of the more important aspects of this visit in somewhat greater detail, and let's start with the nuclear deal problems. To begin with, the Americans have taken a new position on this whole issue to do with administrative arrangements for nuclear monitoring of equipment. Initially, you were not in favor of the Indian proposal that it should happen under the auspices of the IAEA. You've since changed your position. What explains that change?
I don't know if it was really a change in position. Under our law, there are requirements to track materials. And for the first time, we got a commitment from the Indian government to come up with data and through consultations that we would have regularly that would satisfy that requirement. The reason why the president referred to this as a breakthrough, not only on the administrative arrangements, but on the liability, is because for the first time the two sides deployed their legal experts, their best experts in non-proliferation and nuclear power, and sat down over a concerted period to talk through these issues. That had not occurred before. It had not occurred until September's visit when the Prime Minister went to Washington and the two heads of state committed to solving the problems that were preventing not only U.S. companies, but all companies from entering this critical sector.
So you're saying to me it was the fact that the two heads of government got together and gave instructions to their officials that led to America accepting the Indian proposal that the administrative mechanism for tracking and auditing nuclear equipment should happen under the auspices of the IAEA. This was a push from the two principals themselves.
Look, I think it's probably a better way to characterize it is both sides came together, and there was an understanding that was reached on both administrative arrangements and on liability. We are confident that we're going to receive the kind of information we need to satisfy U.S. law.
Let's pursue the liability issue a little further, because although the president characterized it as a breakthrough understanding, the New York Times has called it vague and inconclusive. Are you absolutely sure that, first of all, to talk about the resolution for Section 46, that you actually got something that will appeal to American supplier firms?
Look, I think what has to happen now is that we continue to meet. I think the contact group will continue to meet. They will meet with not only U.S. companies, but other interested parties. And they'll have to understand, as we did, the Indian position on channeling of liability to the operator, which is not a U.S. position. Mind you, this is an international position under an international convention of which India is a signatory to. So they don't have to satisfy just us. They have to satisfy the terms of the convention.
Absolutely. But the newspapers have reported that the solution that is being talked about to Section 46 in particular is that a memorandum or an assurance will be issued by the Attorney General. Is that in fact the fact?
I think so. What I would do is refer you to the Indian government as to how they want to present the understandings to the government and to the people. I would just say they came forward with a team of experts, presented why their 2010 law, subsequent regulation, and case law, when you put it all together, is compliant with the International Convention on Channeling of Liability. And that was something we thought met the terms of the international convention, and look, if there are remaining concerns that companies have, we'll certainly work with them. But that's why this was such a new and unique moment in this debate. I was involved in the passage of the law in 2006.
Can I put two concerns to you? The first concern is that if this is to be resolved, Section 46 in particular, by an assurance or a memorandum from the Attorney General, it runs the risk that it could be challenged in court and struck down. Because people ask, can an assurance take precedence over law passed by Parliament? Now, that's a risk you're running here, that you might get an assurance that you believe is watertight, which then gets challenged and struck down in court. What happens then?
Look, I think this is the kind of challenge that companies face every day. When you enter into a new market, through contract, through law, through case law, through regulatory provisions, through administrative understandings, companies working with their legal teams have to decide whether they've got the set of protections and assurances, and they manage that business risk with the legal risk, with the opportunity to serve the population in a country like this. We can't judge how ultimately a certain company might decide where we came out on this position, but I will tell you we are committed to seeing this through so the 300 million people that do not have electricity can actually get a shot at it.
Ambassador, something has become crystal clear from the answer you've just given me, and that is that what the two governments have done is reach an understanding which ensures that no longer is this question of Section 46 a problem between the two governments. It's now become an issue for individual supplier firms to address as they individually see fit. It's moved off a government-to-government agenda. Now it's a problem for companies to tackle on their own.
I think we should go back again to the September dialogue between the two leaders with a commitment to get past this liability issue, whether it's Section 46 or Section 17, or Rule 24, take your pick. There are a lot of questions about the various sections. We had sustained dialogue with the Indian team over 3 cities, over 3 months, and finally understood their position, coupled with their intent to ratify the convention. Remember, this is an international norm and practice, not a U.S. requirement.
Let's come, in fact, to the way the two governments have sought to resolve their differences over Section 17P. The Indian government and 5 Indian insurance companies are going to set up an insurance pool of some 1,500 crore. But the key question is, will the cost of the premium for that insurance cover be met by the American supplier, or will it be partly or wholly subsidized from the Indian end?
Let me just say that the insurance pool is a novel idea. We're going to work with the Indian government in providing whatever technical consultations is required on setting up the insurance pool, to the extent it can help minimize the liability that might still exist for suppliers that come to suppliers through contracting terms. That's a good thing.
But who pays the premium?
Well, look, I don't want to prejudge the outcome, because I think the insurance pool has not even been established yet. So I think you're asking me a question that probably has more chapters to go.
Absolutely.
In this story.
But when you say you don't want to prejudge the outcome, you're suggesting to me that it's possible that at the end of the day, that premium will be partly or wholly subsidized from the Indian end, that it won't be paid by the supplier in America.
I don't think I'm saying that at all. I think what I'm saying is the insurance pool will be set up according to international custom. This is not the first insurance pool of its kind. We're going to provide consultation and technical expertise, so I'd encourage you to stay tuned and see where this leads.
The only thing I'm a little curious about is, when companies go to the insurance pool to seek cover, particularly for nuclear liability, they pay a premium. I would have thought you'd say to me that clearly the premium cost will be paid by the supplier, but you're not saying that.
I'm actually saying something different, which is we're at chapter 1 in this story, and that we've reached an understanding now where we can now work on the insurance pool. We can work on the ratification of the Indians will work on the ratification of the convention. We will work with our companies. And the contact group will continue to meet. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want to get out in front of where the experts, of which I'm not an insurance expert, will have to judge how best to establish the pool.
Let me put this to you. Are the American supplier firms, Westinghouse and GE in particular, satisfied with the nature of the solutions you've worked out with Mr. Modi, or do they have concerns which they've expressed which still need to be resolved?
Look, I think their concerns, and I'm sure they still have questions that need to be resolved, will be. Well, again, we're going to continue to engage with them over the coming weeks and months, and this contact group process will continue to exist. I know both are very interested in coming into the market, are working very hard at trying to get here, and I think they welcomed the sustained discussions and this understanding that was reached.
Now, one of the issues that rankles with people is this comment made by the New York Times that the outcome is vague and inconclusive, because many feel that in fact we don't know enough. There are still loose ends that need to be tied. There are still question marks whether the courts will strike down an agreement that you've reached, whether the premium will add to the cost, or whether it will be a subsidy. Do you think that at the end of the day, if you're going to seriously and effectively address these concerns, at some point the nuclear liability law itself will have to be amended? May not be today, but down the road that is a bullet that has to be bitten.
Look, I think what we have to assess over the coming year is whether India is able to meet the promise of generating electricity in a way. Remember, let's take a step back to meet the demands of its people, but let's take a step back and remember what this is about. This was about trying to serve non-carbon-based generation of electricity, whether that's from solar or wind or nuclear or hydro.
There we're in complete agreement, but is the liability law a problem, and do you need to actually bite the bullet of amending it rather than find clever ways around it?
Right, and so what I guess what I would encourage the people who follow this closely is to see if the solution that has been reached will allow the companies the pathway to come in and begin to set up in India and to begin to produce power.
So you're asking companies, look at this carefully before you decide whether you like it or not.
Look, today's Friday. The president left on Tuesday night. So I think, you know, the details have barely come out yet, have barely been briefed to the companies, and so I think that would be the prudent course.
Let's then, Ambassador, come to the Defence Framework Agreement, as well as the announcement that the two countries will consider 4 projects jointly under the Defence Trade and Technology Initiative, and perhaps 2 more, which they're then going to look at for the future. Sure. And let's begin with the new DFA. Chuck Hagel has commented that, in fact, it opens a new chapter in Indo-US military relations. In what way does it do this?
Well, look, I think it charts the course for the next 10 years. This was historic in 2005 when it was first signed. I think, you know, no one knew that we would sign another 10-year agreement, and there we have yet locked in another 10-year agreement where we agree to cooperate on joint training, on joint exercises, on combating weapons of mass destruction and piracy and other common concerns that we have. And so, yes, I think it's a breakthrough. I think it brings our 2 national security establishments and defense departments and ministries and soldiers and sailors and airmen closer together, and that's a good thing.
Now, it's no secret that when he was Defense Minister, A.K. Antony had serious reservations about deepening and furthering military relations with America. Are you confident that Manohar Parrikar, the present Defense Minister, thinks very differently?
So I can't speak for him. All I know is that this agreement was reached. The agreement is far-reaching in many respects, as Secretary Hagel said, as the President has said. And frankly, I think this was, again, back in September, the Prime Minister and the President said this is an area we want to solidify and lock in. And I think the evidence is very clear from the terms of the framework agreement and in the defense co-production and co-development agreement.
But do you feel Indian inhibitions are less, perhaps completely disappeared?
I think all I would say, as I said at the beginning and as the President said, this is a new moment in the relationship. The fact that we now have a strategic vision architecture, not just in South Asia, but in East Asia as well. The fact that we have updated the strategic partnership to become a strategic and commercial dialogue, the fact that we issued a declaration of friendship, things are different, and that's a good thing.
That's the important thing. Things are different. A new chapter has opened.
A new chapter has opened. It is a new moment. The President said he would like America to be India's best partner. We believe that's the direction we are headed.
Coming quickly to the 4 projects under the DTI. Comments have been made that these are rather modest. Comments have been made that the technology involved is by no means complex. Is that understandable because this is the start of an initiative, or is this a disappointing start?
Oh no, this is a historic start. Think back only 2 or 3 years ago. Would anyone think that we would have gotten to this place where we're announcing 6 potential initiatives, 4 specific Pathfinder projects, a working group, an intent to explore another area of jet technology, aircraft carrier technology? I mean, we have come a long way. Where we are in defense sales and collaboration and training, I think we don't often pause enough to look at how far we've come in a short period of time. I think we also should not be satisfied that this is sufficient. I think we should try to go further.
So you're saying to me this is not just a great start, but it's an opening for much more in the future?
Absolutely.
Let's come, Ambassador, to the convergence of thinking between the two heads of government over China. Now, the New York Times says that in their one-to-one conversation, China was the dominant subject between the two heads of government, and the paper adds, Mr. Obama and his aides discovered to their surprise that Mr. Modi's assessment of China's rise and its impact on the greater strategic situation in East Asia was closely aligned with their own. Is that factually correct?
I guess I would put it slightly differently. I would say that the two leaders had a broad set of discussions on security and economic issues, but also on regional issues. And of course, the subject of the Asia-Pacific came up, and of course, China came up. But our position has been clear for many times, that, and as the President has said, we support the peaceful rise of China. We don't seek to contain China. In fact, we don't.
But was there a convergence between the two men on their thinking, their attitude in response to China?
Absolutely. And let me just say that we both share kind of a common approach, which is elements of cooperation and elements of competition. We have large economic relationships with China, and to the extent there are concerns about security or human rights, we have a robust dialogue, as the Indians and the Chinese have a robust dialogue. It is in our interest for India and China to have a very strong relationship.
So as American ambassador, let me ask you this question. In your eyes, how important is the strategic joint shared vision on Asia-Pacific and the Indian Ocean region? Because it took many in India by surprise. Several Indian former foreign secretaries were actually amazed that this had happened. So I'm going to ask you that question. In your eyes, how significant is the fact that they have a shared joint vision?
I think it's very important. But I also think it builds off of the September visit, because there was a strategic, very important strategic component in the September visit. But obviously this is important. But I would reframe it slightly, because if you look at that vision document, it talks about economic integration, talks about trade, talks about universal human rights. It talks about upholding a rules-based democratic order. It talks about peaceful resolution of disputes. These are all great things that the two largest democracies in the world coming together and standing up for these kinds of values is a powerful, powerful thing.
Without doubt. But the sentence that stood out for an Indian audience was the one which said that the two affirmed the importance of safeguarding maritime security and ensuring freedom of navigation and overflight, especially in the South China Sea. That was a clear alignment of the fact that India and America not only look at China in similar ways, but are responding in similar ways. That, to many, was a new development.
Well, look, again, I think that language you'll find in the September statement. I think the paragraph that comes after it talks about the peaceful resolution of disputes pursuant to the rule of law. These two great democratic powers coupled together. The President said, if we're the closest of partners, the world will be a safer place.
Absolutely. In fact, the New York Times went one step further. We in India had noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed this yourself, that the two heads of governments have a special relationship. They clearly have a rapport with each other. But the New York Times says Mr. Modi is eager to redefine India's relationship with the United States. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think there's been good evidence of that so far. And I think the two leaders had a good chemistry. They spent at least 4 or 5 sessions, just the two of them, one-on-one, talking about issues. And that personal chemistry is important. But the President said something interesting, which I would just convey to you and your listeners, which is, you know, more importantly than the relationship between two leaders are the shared values between the two people.
Absolutely.
And he said it's no surprise that two countries that are built on diversity and tolerance and rule of law and democratic principles, it's no surprise that the two leaders would have a friendship. And he thinks that's what it really pulls the two states together.
I'll come to the shared values in a moment's time, because that then takes me on to talk about the President's very landmark speech, his town hall speech hours before he left. But first, one other question on this new dimension, this new architecture of the relationship between the two countries. I noticed that the two other heads of government with whom the Prime Minister has a personal rapport are Shinzo Abe of Japan and Tony Abbott of Australia, and both of them are very close allies of Washington. Do we see here the makings, the beginning of a special four-way relationship?
Well, look, I guess I would say the president talked a lot about regional integration, working through multilateral and regional organizations. And look, India has important relationships with both of the countries you mentioned, as do we. And we'll have to see where this goes. But I do think, as you started the question, the security architecture and the framework of the strategic relationship is something important and something that we have to build on as two democracies in this part of the world. The Act East that the Prime Minister talks about and our rebalance in Asia, where half the trade, more than half the world will live, it's just a recognition that we have to be kind of upholding our important values there.
So the relationship actually has risen to a higher level after this visit. It is now at another dimension altogether.
I think if you look at the statements of the leaders, if you look at the friendship declaration, if you look at the strategic vision statement, we are in a different place. We are at, I think, what the president called this new moment, and the opportunity for, again, for the United States to become the best partner for India.
In that context then, Ambassador, let's come to what I called was a very landmark speech delivered in his town hall setting, literally hours before he left the country. Now, the president said, and I'm going to quote him, "Every person has the right to practice their faith as they choose. Nowhere," he added, "is that more important than in India." Many people believe that what he possibly had in mind were the conversion campaigns and the love jihad campaigns that have created so much controversy in India over the last few weeks and months.
I think you should look at the speech carefully. And this is consistent with what the president has said repeatedly over his time in office. So consistent with what he said at the UN General Assembly last fall, that we have to stand up for all people, and that we have to stand up for people's dreams and aspirations. That's on grounds of diversity, on gender equality, on religious freedom, and that these kinds of divisions can hold us both back. If you look at the speech carefully, he talked as much about the United States and our challenges and our goal to make a more perfect union as much as he talked about India. So
I don't deny that for a moment, but he said something else that struck my attention, and it certainly caught the attention of the media. It caught the attention of most politicians, and it was when he said, and he said it very poignantly, "India will succeed so long as it's not splintered along lines of religious faith." Was that a gentle, subtle way of saying to Mr. Modi, you need to speak out when things like love jihad and conversion campaigns threaten to disrupt your country, because your silence could endanger your own development plans for your country?
Look, I think the words speak for themselves, and the words are powerful, as are the words that he said just before that, about that we seek out the best in people, and that peace often starts within one's heart, and that we can talk about the geostrategic, we can talk about the geopolitical, but we also have to look about what's in the hearts and minds of people and support their democratic aspirations, support their dreams, support their rights for equality and tolerance. He was talking as much to the American people and to people around the world as he was the people of India.
You're absolutely right, Ambassador, when you say that those words speak for themselves, when you add that they're extremely powerful. But was there a message there for the Indian government per se?
Oh, I don't know. I think, look, when he was here 4 years ago, he spoke in Parliament and laid out his vision of where he thought the U.S. and India relationship could go. This was a speech to people, specifically to young people, to think about some of these issues, and that governments are inherently limited, and that we do need people to stand up for these basic values of diversity and tolerance, peace, resolution of disputes peacefully. Those are the kinds of things he wanted to communicate, especially to young people.
Absolutely, and in fact he did it very poignantly by referring to India's own constitution. He cited Article 25, which guarantees the right to practice, profess and propagate one's faith, and then he added, very importantly, that it's the responsibility of government to uphold what he called these foundational principles. You're really saying to me that's not a direct message at the Indian Prime Minister?
Oh, no, I think this was a message that was for all people, and not just people in India. Again, I think when...
It was universal.
Absolutely. He talked, the president likes to talk a lot about these rights, these universal rights. And we're here in Roosevelt House, named after the Roosevelt family, and I would just say that Eleanor Roosevelt is very famous as saying that universal rights are found in small places. They're found in villages and cafes and neighborhoods and in people's hearts. And so for a leader to stand up and remind people that those values are not necessarily, can always be the responsibility of government.
And these are the shared values which are the bedrock of the relationship, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Without these shared values, the strategic vision has no place, it has no meaning.
If we didn't have these shared values, we would not have such a partnership. We are unique in that way, that these values bring us together. And that's why we have this different relationship.
Was the president happy with the response he got from the audience in City Fort?
Absolutely. I mean, I was there, and it was a very emotional and spontaneous response. I think the feedback we've gotten from political, non-governmental, civil society has been exceptionally positive, and only the president can give a speech like that.
That's absolutely true. This was one of President Obama's most personal, certainly one of his most powerful speeches,
right,
which is why it resonated in this country. Have you had any response from the Indian government?
I think, look, we haven't talked about the speech specifically, but the reaction that we've gotten from all levels of leadership have been really so enthused about where we're headed and the trajectory that we're on. Grateful that the president would spend 3 full days here with the First Lady and make this kind of commitment. Now again, the hard work remains on so many fronts, on climate, on education, on health care, and the work that we can do together, not only here in India, but in other places around the world. That's my mission. That's what I have to do on behalf of the president. We have a great team here. And I'm really, for me, it's not only a professional opportunity to do this, it's a great personal opportunity.
Can I pick you up on that hard work, because you mentioned that is your mission. Those are the things that you're going to have to tackle, and I'll ask you 2 quick questions. One is, people say there were no major economic agreements. All that the 2 governments or the 2 heads of government have agreed to do is to either start or restart talks on a bilateral investment treaty, talks on totalization, talks on intellectual property rights. And people sense that actually here there's an awful lot of hard work that lies ahead of you. Am I right in that interpretation, that this is the difficult area where finding convergence wasn't possible and you're going to have to work pretty hard at it?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think I saw something very different, which was on the 2nd day of the visit, with both leaders spending almost 4 hours with business leaders, with experts in the field, to talk about all the ways that we could increase two-way trade between the countries. Trade is already up 60% between the India and the United States just over the last 2 or 3 years. It's up 5 times from where it was 10 years ago. Now,
but you want to boost it to 500 billion.
The president has set out an ambitious goal of 500 billion. Think about this, that U.S. exports into India only account for 2% of India's
and 1%
and 1% of Indian exports go to the United States. So, look, we are nowhere close to realizing the potential of what both of our countries will find possible in the trade and economic area, and trade and economics is what brings our people together even more.
My last question, it's another one of those elements of hard work that lie ahead personally for you. It's to do with climate change. There was a lot of hope, particularly on the American side, that you might come close to some sort of agreement. You didn't. But what you did get was a very personal, powerful, moral commitment from the Prime Minister, and an understanding in the joint statement to work together towards an ambitious agreement in Paris. Are you happy with it, or does this fall considerably short of your expectations?
Oh, no. I think the President and Prime Minister had a good discussion and meeting of the minds on the importance that climate change presents to both of our countries. And he said, you know, President Obama said specifically that climate change will impact India in a way that it may not impact any other country, and that people will be watching India in the year to come on what it will do in the upcoming climate talks. So there's a lot of kind of interest. India plays a leadership role here, and I would actually say that there was a very good agreement reached on supporting India's aggressive renewable targets. U.S. will come in with financing opportunities, continue to work on technology and innovation, but the clean energy pathway, as Secretary Kerry says, the solution to climate change is energy policy, and The U.S. is committed to working with India on developing clean and renewable sources of energy. We have a lot in store, but I think it's a great pathway for the future, for future collaboration.
Ambassador, you've answered all my questions. We've covered a whole range of issues, from the nuclear issue to defense, to climate and the economy, to the strategic vision, to the nature of the relationship between the two men. You've got, as you said repeatedly, a lot of hard work ahead of you. Do you look forward to the next 2-3 years as ambassador in India with this terrific mandate behind you given by the two heads of government?
Absolutely. Look, I think it's rare that in a 4-month period you could have two leaders come together, shake hands, and agree on a vision and a strategic architecture going forward. So we know what our marching orders are. We know what the pathways are. We know that we are going to work hard at making America India's best partner. And for me personally as well, what a great opportunity for me. My father left here 50 years ago and arrived in New York City with $24 and a bus ticket. So for me to come back in this capacity is not only a great professional opportunity, but a great personal opportunity. And we've been welcomed by the people here so incredibly well. And so I am really looking forward to working hard. And look, we will have challenges, but I think with good dialogue and with a lot of collaboration, we'll get through them. Because as you said, and as the President said, our values are really what make this relationship so different and so special.
Ambassador Verma, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.